Welcome to America's Future. My name is Bill McNally from Windham, New Hampshire. My program tonight will feature two guests. Mr. Hal Shurtleff, who is the major coordinator for the John Birch Society, will interview our other guest, Mr. Robert Bell, who is on tour, on a speaking tour for the John Birch Society. He will be speaking tonight at the Windham Town Hall, and his subject is Murder by Government, Can It Happen Here? Mr. Bell is a member of the Council of the John Birch Society and a very successful entrepreneur. Mr. Bell has been in the forefront of the fight to turn back increasing powerful government in America for decades. His study of history and the rise of oppressive governments in the 20th century provide unique insights into the events of today and paint a clear picture of the related dangers that America faces now. So I'll turn the program over to Mr. Hal Shurtleff.
Thank you very much, Bill, for the introduction. Again, my name is Harold Shurtleff. I serve as the John Birch Society's Regional Field Director. I live in the city of Boston, and I'm very happy to be able to interview our guest today, Mr. Bob Bell. By the way, he was mentioned that he was an entrepreneur. He actually owns an amusement park in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a very successful privately run business as well. With a roller coaster?
That's right.
That's right, okay. I've been on a roller coaster once because the girl I was dating at the time dared me to, and I had to do it, and never again, I don't believe. Anyway, Mr. Bell was on a nationwide speaking tour on behalf of the John Birch Society, and as was introduced earlier, he serves as a member of our National Council, a volunteer position. So we're very glad that we're able to get you out of your tour and sit you down in the studio. By the way, the speech he's giving tonight, which is November 5th, will be aired on this public access station. So obviously you won't be able to make it if you're just hearing about it, but you will be able to hear the comments he has to say. The topic is death by government. Not exactly something that would bring a lot of people, necessarily get a lot of people excited. It's kind of a gruesome topic. And I'd like to qualify that by saying something interesting. A couple of years ago, the Boston Herald had an article about the city of Boston selling some of its police handguns to Central America. And the city council, some members of the city council were quite upset about this. And once they determined that they were sold to governments in Central America, well, that was okay. It was a non-issue after that. Well, we're relieved. Well, I couldn't let this one drop. What I did was I called the two city councilors in question here, and I said, have you no understanding of how guns in the hands of government, when there's a monopoly especially, that leads to genocide and democide? And I took a little book, well, not a little book actually, but the book called Death by Government, and I hope you can get this, by R.J. Rummel. R.J. Rummel's a professor, I believe, in Hawaii, University of Hawaii, and he's not exactly what you call a conservative, but he's an honest intellectual, and he understands that when you have total government, you have the possibility of democide. So let me, first off, I'll ask you, what made this subject important to you? Why would you want to go on a national speaking tour and talk about this?
Well, I think it's important for the viewers to understand that I've been a member of the John Birch Society since 1964. And the reason that I joined the society was because I thought people should be better informed about issues like this democide issue. And I found it the most effective organization to really get the story out. And so over the years, I became aware of all the democide that was being forced on people being murdered by their own government, all through the years. And I thought, I need to get all these facts together. And luckily, there was this book, Death by Government, written by Dr. Rummel, and it just fit perfect with what I was trying to get across to people. And so after a thorough reading of the subject and several other sources, I incorporated this into a speech that I gave to a Robert Welch University summer camp. This is somewhat of an ad hoc organization that is part of the John Birch Society, and the Robert Welch summer camps are open for children from 12 to 22 years old. I gave this speech about this death by government And it was so warmly received by the young children, I thought, well, if it's good enough for them, it's certainly good enough for the adults. And so I went on the speaking tour, and so far I've given this speech 16 times throughout the country, and it's been well received in all these communities.
You mentioned the young people, and I have the honor to serve as a director of one of our summer camps, the Robert Welch University summer camps. It's interesting that a lot of this history that you give in your talk is, or was unknown to these youngsters, and even unknown to their parents in many respects. They have no idea what happened in these various countries and why it happened. We hear a lot about the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, but we don't hear about Holocausts that happened in other parts of the world at other times, and even some more very recent ones. Let me get back to a little bit of history in New England here. You've been to this area on a number of occasions, and like most patriotic type people, you go to Concord, Lexington, and Massachusetts because you want to see where it sort of all began in many respects. And why don't you relate that little story you told me just before we got on camera?
Well, I believe it was in the winter of 1985, and I came through here, and I stayed at the Concord Inn in Concord, and I was just dying to see the Concord Bridge. And luckily, there had been a snow overnight, and I went to the bridge, and it was such a moving experience to see like the 4 to 6 inches of snow. And I came back really inspired by that view, and I knew what had happened there, and I knew some of the history. I asked the young lady who was at the desk of the Concord Inn, I said, do you know why the British marched all the way from Boston Harbor, all the way out to Lexington, and then on to Concord? Do you know why they came all that distance? Well, if they were going to have a showdown, why didn't they have the showdown in Boston Harbor where they were really strong? Why did they march all that way? And the young lady was without an answer. She said, I really don't know. And I gave the answer. They came here to get the guns. This is where the ammunition and the ball and the powder and the cannons that were owned by the American colonies, they were stored in barns called magazines, and that's why they came here. The British were here to disarm the Americans.
And as disarmed individuals, we're pretty much helpless in the face of any type of tyranny. Will it be a criminal, or will it be, if that criminal happens to be wearing a badge, or he's wearing a uniform, or he happens to be a local thug, we're at their mercy. There's a very popular movie that came out, I don't know how many years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, Schindler's List. Pretty gruesome story of a concentration camp in Nazi Germany. And it was actually aired on national TV. It showed in the movie theaters, and the director, Steven Spielberg, after it was over, he came on in the movie itself and gave a little talk about anti-Semitism and how hatred leads to genocide. But he left out probably the most important ingredient. And I was really incensed. And after I watched this, I said he forgot about the most important part, whether deliberately or what have you. Adolf Hitler by himself couldn't have killed anybody, or could have killed a few people perhaps, and he would have been arrested, and that would have been the end of Adolf Hitler's career. But he used the power of government to commit that genocide. And that's where most genocide, or in this case the word democide, is done by government. So anti-Semitism or any type of hatred with the power of government leads to this type of thing. And that's what a lot of folks don't understand. And a lot of liberal people who rightly criticize what happened in Nazi Germany, I don't question it. Should be known. We should talk about it.
Absolutely.
But they forget. And in fact, they embrace some of the worst genocidal maniacs even today, which is really perplexing.
I think one of the important things is that about the Holocaust. Now, I think it's good that there is a Holocaust museum. I do believe that they are not telling the whole story, because in addition to the 6 million Jews that were killed, there was another 12 to 14 million non-combatants that were killed by the Nazis in all these different Western and Eastern European countries. And they were able to accomplish this democide because these different countries had already been disarmed. In the case of, let's say, Holland, where all they had were registration lists, the Germans would go in, get the registration list, go to the house where the guns were supposed to be, and demand within 1 to 2 minutes that the guns be delivered or someone died. Now that's how you disarm people when all you have is registration. So it's important that people understand these democidal practices in the very beginning before they can happen.
I understand under the Weimar Republic, which preceded the Nazi regime, that they had gun confiscation. I mean, they had very strict gun control. You were allowed to have weapons, but there was a list, and when the Nazis took over, they just simply, like you said, they knocked down doors, delivered, unless you were a party member and you had special privileges. One of the things we hear a lot about is that, sure, it could happen in Rwanda, it can happen here, it can happen in this country, but goodness sakes, it could never happen in this country. And do you think, could it happen in this country? Has it happened?
Absolutely. In fact,
but even with all these wonderful liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans, it could still happen? Our progressive free thinkers that we run our country, it could still happen?
The only thing that keeps democide from happening in the United States is our beloved Constitution. And you see how it's being neutralized day after day by a Supreme Court that's gone wild, or an executive branch that just totally turns its back on the Constitution, and the legislative branch, the Congress and the Senate, the House of Representatives and the Senate. So when you have that sort of thing happening, you can see how we're losing, especially our rights guaranteed by the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, of course, is the right to keep and bear arms, but it protects our right to keep and bear arms.
I thought it was just for hunting purposes. Isn't that what we're told?
Well, whoever gets the arms for whatever purpose and under what guise, under what trickery they may develop, it still disarms the people. That's the one thing that always happens. You disarm the people, a national or federal police force comes in.
And that's happening. That's being built today.
Absolutely. And look how our local police are being subsidized by the federal government. When was the last time you heard of a police chief or a sheriff say, whoop, no, we don't want any more of your federal aid?
That's right.
They never turn it down. Oh, there may be a few instances where they have turned it down. But that is so much a minority, and even then, it's not even talked about in the national media.
A few years ago, we were using the Burlington Library, Burlington, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston, just a little south of Windham. And there was a vehicle, what I would call a half-track. It was an armored vehicle. Now, it wasn't the old antique that you see in front of a VFW post. And I thought, what in the world is this half-track doing here? Now, Burlington is not exactly a wide-open community. I mean, it's pretty much a suburban, upper-middle class. So I looked into it a little bit and found out there was an entity, a police-type entity, that was getting federal money and giving it to these various towns that requested it. And this was for riot control. Well, I don't think there have been too many riots in Burlington, yet they have this piece of equipment there, and it's happening all over the country. And in fact, one of the things, I haven't seen too many recent